The blizzard descended upon the Montana territory like a vengeful spirit on that bitter February afternoon in 1877, transforming the landscape into a howling white nightmare that made Clara Vaughn wonder if she would see another sunrise. She had been riding for 3 days straight, her horse carrying her away from a past she refused to acknowledge and toward a future that remained uncertain at best. The small mining settlement she had been aiming for should have appeared hours ago, but visibility had shrunk to mere feet as snow pelted her face with stinging force. Her mare stumbled, exhausted beyond measure, and Clara knew with sinking certainty that they could not continue. Her fingers had long since lost feeling inside her leather gloves, and her wool coat, though thick, seemed to offer no more protection than tissue paper against the savage cold. The temperature had dropped so dramatically that her eyelashes froze together when she blinked too slowly. Through the wall of white, she glimpsed something dark and solid, a structure of some kind. Hope surged through her chest as she urged her protesting horse toward what revealed itself to be a small hunting cabin, half buried in snowdrifts but miraculously still standing. Clara practically fell from her saddle, her legs barely able to support her weight as she led her mare around to what passed for a lean-to on the structure's eastern side. The partial shelter would have to do. Her hands shook violently as she tried to unbuckle the saddle, but her fingers refused to cooperate. Tears of frustration froze on her cheeks as she struggled with the simple task. She had come so far, survived so much, only to potentially freeze to death within reach of shelter. "Let me help you with that." The voice came from directly behind her, and Clara spun so quickly she nearly fell. A man stood there, tall and solid despite the wind that threatened to knock them both over. He wore a heavy coat dusted white with snow, and a wool scarf covered the lower half of his face. Only his eyes were visible, a startling gray-blue that reminded her of storm clouds. "Who are you?" she managed to ask through chattering teeth. "Name is Marcus Jennings. I have been using this cabin for 2 days waiting out the storm. Your horse needs tending." He did not wait for permission but began efficiently removing her saddle, his movements sure and practiced despite the cold. "Get yourself inside. There is a fire going." Clara wanted to protest, to maintain the fierce independence that had carried her this far, but practicality won over pride. She was going to die out here if she did not get warm, and dying seemed like a waste after everything she had been through. She stumbled toward the cabin door, shouldering it open against the accumulated snow. The interior was dim and smoky, but blessedly warm compared to the howling nightmare outside. A fire crackled in a small stone hearth, and the single room contained little beyond a rough table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed frame with what appeared to be a straw-filled mattress. Shelves along one wall held various supplies, and animal pelts hung from hooks near the door. Clara moved immediately to the fire, stripping off her frozen gloves and holding her hands as close to the flames as she dared. Pain shot through her fingers as sensation began returning, and she bit back a cry. The door opened again, admitting a blast of frigid air along with Marcus Jennings. He carried both saddles over his shoulders and her saddlebags in one hand. After depositing them near the door, he returned outside twice more, bringing in additional supplies and finally armfuls of wood from what must have been a covered pile nearby. "Your horse is settled," he said, unwinding the scarf from his face. He was younger than Clara had expected, perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair and a strong jaw shadowed with several days of stubble. A thin scar ran along his right cheekbone, pale against wind-burned skin. "She is exhausted but will be fine with rest and feed. I put her next to my gelding." "Thank you," Clara managed, Now that the immediate crisis had passed, awkwardness settled over her. She was alone in a cabin with a strange man, miles from anywhere, trapped by a blizzard. Every instinct screamed danger, but looking at Marcus as he efficiently stoked the fire and assessed their situation, she felt no threat from him. "You were heading somewhere specific?" he asked, glancing at her as he added another log to the fire. "Silver City," she said. "I have a teaching position waiting there. Or I did, if I am not too late arriving." Marcus nodded slowly. "Silver City is a good 20 miles northeast of here, maybe more. You were heading the right direction, but you would not have made it another hour in this weather." He moved to one of the shelves and pulled down a tin coffee pot and a cloth bag. "When did you last eat?" Clara tried to remember. "Yesterday morning, I think. I was rationing my supplies. I have enough for both of us. The storm should break in a day or two." He measured coffee grounds into the pot with the ease of long practice. "I am a trapper. This is one of my cabins I use during winter runs. Not much, but it is solid." As he worked, Clara studied him more carefully. His clothes were worn but well maintained, his movements economical and purposeful. There was a quietness about him, a self-containment that suggested someone comfortable with solitude. He wore a gun belt, she noticed, but the weapon remained holstered and seemed as much a tool as a threat. "I am Clara Vaughn," she offered, realizing they had skipped proper introductions in the urgency of survival. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Vaughn, though I wish the circumstances were better." Marcus filled the pot with snow and set it near the fire to melt and heat. "You were traveling alone?" "Yes." She offered no explanation, and he did not press for one. They fell into silence as Marcus prepared a simple meal of beans, salt pork, and hardtack softened in the bean broth. Clara watched him work, noting the competence in every action. He had clearly spent considerable time in rough conditions. Yet there was something refined about him too, something that suggested education, or at least intelligence beyond what one might expect from a frontier trapper. When the food was ready, they sat at the small table, and Clara discovered she was ravenously hungry. The meal was plain but hot, and she thought nothing had ever tasted better. Outside, the wind shrieked and howled, rattling the shuttered window and seeking every crack in the walls, but inside they were safe and warming steadily. "You said you are a teacher?" Marcus asked after they had eaten in silence for several minutes. "I was. In St. Louis. I." Clara hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I needed a change, a fresh start. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Silver City, it seemed like Providence." Marcus nodded as though that explanation were perfectly sufficient. "It is a good town. Growing, but not wild like some of the mining camps. They built a proper schoolhouse last year, or so I heard when I was through there in the fall. You know the area well." "I have been trapping these territories for 5 years now. Montana, Wyoming, parts of Dakota. I know most of the settlements between here and the Canadian border." He poured coffee for them both, the bitter aroma filling the small cabin. "Your family must be worried about you." "I have no family," Clara said quietly. "Not anymore." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, understanding perhaps, or sympathy. "Nor do I," he said simply. "Not for many years now." The admission created an unexpected bond between them, a recognition of shared loneliness. They were both adrift in their own ways, both seeking something in this harsh and unforgiving landscape. As evening deepened, the temperature outside plummeted further. Marcus banked the fire carefully, explaining that they needed to conserve wood, but keep enough heat to survive the night. The cabin, small as it was, retained warmth reasonably well, but Clara could feel cold radiating from the walls. "You should take the bed," Marcus said, pulling down several thick furs from the hooks. I will make a pallet by the fire. That hardly seems fair, Clara protested. This is your cabin, and you are my guest. His tone made clear the discussion was over. He arranged the furs near the hearth with practiced efficiency, creating what actually looked like a reasonably comfortable sleeping area. Clara was too exhausted to argue further. She removed only her boots before lying down on the bed, pulling her coat over herself as an additional blanket. Despite her weariness, sleep did not come immediately. She was acutely aware of Marcus's presence just feet away, of their unusual situation, of how quickly her carefully planned journey had been derailed. "Miss Vaughn," Marcus's voice came softly through the darkness. "Yes." "In case the storm worsens during the night, or if anything happens, my rifle is on the shelf above the bed. There is also a revolver in my right saddlebag. You should know where the weapons are." The practicality of his words was somehow reassuring. He was treating her as a capable person, not some delicate flower to be protected or worse, taken advantage of. "Thank you, and please call me Clara." "Clara, then. Good night." "Good night, Marcus." She finally drifted off to the sound of wind battering the cabin and the occasional pop and crackle from the fire. Her last conscious thought was that despite the danger outside and the strangeness of her situation, she felt safer than she had in months. Clara woke to find pale light filtering through gaps in the shutters and the smell of coffee brewing. Marcus was already up, tending the fire and preparing breakfast. The wind still howled outside, though perhaps not quite as ferociously as the day before. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Storm is still going. I checked on the horses earlier. They are fine, though getting restless." Clara sat up, running her fingers through her disheveled hair. She felt rumpled and grimy after days of travel and sleeping in her clothes. "Is there any way to wash up?" Marcus gestured to a basin on the small table. "I melted snow. The water is still warm. There is soap on the shelf, and I will step outside to give you privacy." "In that storm?" "I need to check the wood pile anyway and make sure nothing has blown away." He pulled on his coat and scarf. "Take your time." The luxury of washing her face and hands in warm water felt almost decadent. Clara did her best to make herself presentable, though she was painfully aware that her dress was travel-stained and wrinkled beyond redemption. She had packed her better clothes for when she arrived in Silver City, never imagining circumstances like these. When Marcus returned, stamping snow from his boots, his face was red with cold but his expression satisfied. "Wood pile is holding. We have enough to last several more days if needed, though I do not think it will come to that." They ate a breakfast of cornmeal mush sweetened with a precious bit of molasses, and Clara found herself studying her unexpected companion more closely in the growing daylight. His face was weather-beaten but handsome in a rugged way, and his eyes held an intelligence and alertness that suggested he missed very little. There was also a sadness there, she thought, buried deep but still present. "You said you have been trapping for 5 years," she said as they cleaned up after breakfast. "Is that what you always wanted to do?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Clara thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "No. I studied law back in Ohio, passed the bar when I was 22. I had plans, ambitions." He stared into his coffee cup. "Then the war came," Clara understood. So many men's lives had been irrevocably changed by those terrible years. "You served, Union cavalry. I saw action in Tennessee, Georgia, Virginia when it was over." He trailed off, then shook his head as though clearing cobwebs. When it was over, the thought of going back to a law office, of arguing over property disputes and contract language, seemed impossible, pointless. "I drifted west looking for something, though I could not say what. Found trapping suited me. It is solitary work, but honest. The animals do not lie, and the mountains do not care about your past. The pain in his words resonated with Clara's own reasons for fleeing St. Louis. "I understand that impulse," she said quietly. "Sometimes starting over is the only way forward." Their eyes met across the small table, and something passed between them, a recognition that went deeper than words. They were both wounded in their own ways, both seeking redemption or at least peace in this unforgiving land. The day passed slowly. The storm continued its assault, the wind never quite ceasing its howling song. Marcus checked on the horses again in the afternoon, returning to report they were restless but managing. To pass the time, he and Clara talked, sharing stories carefully edited to avoid the deepest wounds. She learned that he had grown up in a small town outside Cincinnati, the youngest of 3 sons. His brothers had both died in the war, one at Shiloh and one at Gettysburg. His parents had passed within months of each other a year after the war's end. His mother from consumption and his father from what Marcus suspected was simply a broken heart. Clara shared her own history more reluctantly. She had been raised in Boston by a stern aunt after her parents died of typhoid when she was 7. She had trained as a teacher, found work in St. Louis, and been engaged to a banker's son. But the engagement had ended badly, under circumstances she did not elaborate on, and she had found the gossip and sideways looks unbearable. When she had seen the advertisement for a teacher in the Montana Territory, fleeing had seemed like the only option. "You regret leaving?" Marcus asked as they prepared supper that evening. Clara considered the question. "No. Whatever happens, even if the teaching position is lost because I arrive too late, I do not regret leaving. I only regret that I did not leave sooner, on my own terms rather than fleeing." "Leaving takes courage no matter what prompts it," Marcus said. "Trust me, I know. I told everyone in Ohio I was going west to seek my fortune. The truth was I simply could not bear to stay where everything reminded me of what I had lost." Night fell again, and they settled into the same sleeping arrangements as before. But this time, as Clara lay in the darkness listening to the storm, she felt less like a stranger imposing on Marcus's hospitality, and more like they were partners in survival. It was a subtle shift, but significant. "Marcus," she called softly into the darkness. "Yes, thank you. For sharing your cabin, your supplies, your story. I know none of this was how you planned to spend these days." "I am glad you found the cabin," he said, and she heard genuine warmth in his voice. "If you had missed it, you would not have survived the night, and while I am accustomed to solitude, I find your company more pleasant than I expected." Clara smiled in the darkness. "I will take that as a compliment. It was meant as one." The third day of the storm dawned with a subtle change in the quality of the wind. It still blew fiercely, but the relentless howl had diminished slightly, and Marcus declared he thought the worst had passed. "By tomorrow or the next day, we should be able to travel," he said as they breakfasted on the last of the salt pork and some preserved berries he had produced from his supplies. "It will take you another day to reach Silver City from here, maybe 2 depending on conditions. The trail can be difficult even in good weather." Clara felt an unexpected pang at the thought of leaving. These 3 days trapped in the cabin had been strange and challenging, but also oddly peaceful. For the first time in months, she had not felt judged or gossiped about. Marcus treated her as an equal, someone capable and intelligent, and their conversations had ranged from the practical to the surprisingly philosophical. "Will you return to trapping?" she asked, eventually. "I have a buyer in Silver City who takes my furs, so I was heading there anyway when this storm caught me. I will need to resupply as well." He glanced at her. "I could guide you there if you would like. Make sure you arrive safely." "I would appreciate that," Clara said, trying to ignore the little flutter of pleasure his offer caused. "Though I do not want to put you out further." "You are not. As I said, I was heading there regardless." He stood and began checking their supplies, taking inventory. "We should make sure everything is ready to travel once the weather clears." They spent the day in practical preparations, Marcus tending to the horses and checking their tack while Clara sorted through her own supplies and tried to make herself as presentable as possible given the circumstances. She repaired a tear in her coat and did her best to clean and press her better dress, the one she had planned to wear when meeting the school board in Silver City. As evening approached, the storm finally began to break. The wind died to occasional gusts, and the snow, which had fallen almost continuously for 3 days, tapered off to scattered flurries. Marcus opened the shutters slightly, letting in pale light and fresh, brutally cold air. "We will leave at first light," he said. "The horses are rested and ready. It will be cold riding, but the storm has passed." That night, their last in the cabin, seemed charged with something unspoken. They had shared close quarters for 3 days under extraordinary circumstances, but tomorrow they would return to the normal world with its rules and expectations. Clara found herself reluctant to leave the strange intimacy of the cabin, where they had been simply 2 people surviving together, unconcerned with propriety or convention. As she lay in bed waiting for sleep, Clara realized she had been happier these past 3 days than in the months before leaving St. Louis. Marcus had been respectful but not distant, kind but not condescending. He listened when she spoke and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts. It was so different from the men she had known in Missouri, who had either dismissed her as merely decorative or judged her harshly when she failed to meet their impossible standards. "Clara," Marcus's voice came softly from near the fire. "Yes, I have been thinking about Silver City and the teaching position." He paused, and she could hear him shifting on his pallet. "If the position has been filled because of your delayed arrival, there might be other options. The territory is growing. New schools are being established all the time." "Are you suggesting I not continue to Silver City?" No, continue there, of course, but if that particular position is lost, do not give up on teaching entirely. The frontier needs teachers desperately." Another pause. "And I could help. I know many of the settlements and towns. I could make inquiries, spread word that a qualified teacher is available." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest at his offer. "That is very kind of you, Marcus. Thank you." "It is practical," he said, but she could hear a smile in his voice. "Good teachers are valuable. It would be a shame for the territory to lose one simply because of bad timing and worse weather." They fell silent after that, but Clara lay awake for a long time, thinking about Marcus and his unexpected kindness, about how 3 days could change one's perspective so completely. The morning dawned cold and clear, the sky a pale blue that seemed to stretch forever. The world outside the cabin was transformed, buried under several feet of pristine white snow that glittered in the early sunlight. It was beautiful and treacherous in equal measure. Marcus and Clara worked together to prepare for departure, their movements coordinated after days of shared space. They packed supplies carefully, ensuring nothing essential was left behind. The horses, refreshed by days of rest and shelter, seemed eager to move despite the cold. "Stay close behind me," Marcus instructed as they prepared to mount. "The trail is buried, but I know the way. If I signal you to stop, do so immediately. There could be hidden ravines or unstable snow." Clara nodded, settling into her saddle with a grunt of effort. Her muscles had stiffened during their days in the cabin, and riding would be uncomfortable until she loosened up. But discomfort was nothing compared to what she had already survived. They set out into the white landscape, the horses breaking through snow with each step. The going was slow and difficult, but Marcus navigated with confident skill, choosing their path with care. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe, and Clara wrapped her scarf over her mouth and nose, trying to warm the air before it entered her lungs. As the morning progressed, the sun climbed higher but provided little warmth. They stopped once to rest the horses and share some jerky and water. Marcus checked Clara over with a critical eye, making sure she showed no signs of frostbite or hypothermia. "How are you managing?" he asked. "I am cold but fine," Clara assured him. "The clear weather is a blessing, even if the temperature is not. We should reach Silver City by evening if we maintain this pace." He glanced at the position of the sun. "There is an old line shack about halfway that we could use if needed, but I would prefer to push through if possible." "I can manage," Clara said firmly. They continued, the landscape gradually changing as they descended from the higher elevations. Trees became more frequent, providing occasional windbreaks. As afternoon waned toward evening, Clara began to see signs of human habitation. A distant fence line, smoke from a chimney, finally the actual buildings of Silver City appearing in the valley below. The town was larger than Clara had expected, with 2 main streets and numerous side roads. Buildings ranged from rough log structures to more substantial wood frame constructions. She could see what looked like a church, a large mercantile, a hotel, and numerous other businesses. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys, and even from a distance she could see people moving about their business. "It has grown since I was last through," Marcus observed as they approached. "There must be 200 people here now, maybe more." They rode down the main street as dusk gathered, attracting curious looks from the townsfolk. Clara was acutely aware of how she must appear, travel-worn and wind-burned, riding into town with a strange man after days in the wilderness. She held her head high regardless, refusing to show any shame or uncertainty. Marcus led them to the hotel, a 2-story building with a painted sign declaring it the Silver City Lodge. He dismounted and helped Clara down, his hands warm even through her coat. "You should get a room and rest," he said. "I will stable the horses and let you settle in before I inquire about your teaching position." "You do not need to do that," Clara protested. "You have already done so much." "I want to help," Marcus said simply. "Besides, I need a room myself and to conduct my business here. It is no trouble to ask a few questions." The hotel keeper, a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner, looked them over with barely concealed curiosity. "Caught in the storm?" she asked as Marcus requested 2 rooms. "Yes, madam," Clara answered. "I was fortunate to find shelter in time." "You are fortunate indeed," the woman said, her expression softening slightly. 3 travelers froze to death trying to reach outlying ranches during that blow. Worst storm we have seen in years." She handed Clara a key. "Room 4, top of the stairs. Meals are served in the dining room, breakfast at 7, supper at 6. There is a bathhouse out back if you need to wash up." Clara could have kissed the woman at the mention of a bath. "Thank you so much." In her room, small but clean with a real bed and a window overlooking the street, Clara finally allowed herself to relax. She was in Silver City, alive and relatively well despite everything. Now she just needed to secure her teaching position and begin the new life she had traveled so far to find. A knock at her door an hour later revealed Marcus, cleaned up and wearing fresh clothes. He looked almost civilized now, though the wildness of the mountains still clung to him in subtle ways. "The school board president is a man named Elijah Thorne," Marcus reported. "He runs the mercantile. I spoke with him briefly and mentioned that a teacher named Clara Vaughn had been delayed by the storm. He was aware of your expected arrival and had been concerned. He would like to meet with you tomorrow morning at 9 at the schoolhouse. Relief flooded through Clara. Oh, thank you, Marcus. Truly, I do not know how I can ever repay your kindness. No repayment necessary, he said, but she caught something in his expression, something that suggested he was not quite ready to simply part ways. Would you join me for supper? The hotel dining room is supposed to serve decent food, and I confess I am eager for something that did not come from a tin or a burlap sack. Clara smiled. I would like that very much. They ate together in the crowded dining room, drawing a few curious glances, but mostly ignored by the other diners, who were focused on their own meals and conversations. The food, while simple, tasted luxurious after days of trail rations. Beef stew with actual vegetables, fresh bread with butter, and apple pie for dessert. What will you do now? Clara asked as they lingered over coffee. Continue trapping. Marcus was quiet for a moment, staring into his cup. I have been thinking about that, about what I said in the cabin about good teachers being valuable. He looked up, meeting her eyes. The truth is, I am tired, Clara. Tired of being alone in the mountains, tired of running from my past. These days with you made me remember what it is like to have human connection, to talk with someone about more than just survival and trade. Clara's heart began to beat faster. What are you saying? I am saying that perhaps it is time I stopped running. Stopped hiding in the wilderness and rejoined civilization. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand but close. I am saying that I would like to see where this goes, whatever this is between us. Marcus, we have known each other for 3 days. 3 extraordinary days, he countered. I learned more about you and about myself in that cabin than in years of solitude. I know this is sudden, and I know it might seem like foolishness, but Clara, I cannot simply ride away and never see you again. I cannot. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She had been trying not to think about tomorrow, about Marcus leaving to return to his trapping. The thought had created an ache in her chest that she had been determinedly ignoring. I feel it too, she admitted softly, but I do not know what it means or what we should do about it. Then let us find out, Marcus said. I have enough money saved. I could stay in Silver City for a while, see if there is work here. Give us time to truly know each other, to see if these feelings are real or just born of circumstance. It was impractical and possibly foolish, but Clara found herself nodding. I would like that. Very much. They parted that evening with plans to meet for breakfast before Clara's appointment with the school board. Alone in her room, Clara pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks and tried to process everything that had happened. A week ago, she had been fleeing St. Louis, heartbroken and uncertain. Now she was in Montana territory with a teaching position waiting, and a man who made her heart race, suggesting he wanted to court her properly. Life, it seemed, could change very quickly indeed. The meeting with Elijah Thorne went better than Clara had dared hope. The school board president was a kindly man in his 60s who expressed genuine relief at her safe arrival. The position was still hers if she wanted it, with classes to begin in 2 weeks once the current teacher, an elderly man ready for retirement, finished his final term. We are very pleased to have you, Miss Vaughn, Thorne said as he showed her the schoolhouse, a solid building with a wood stove, proper desks, and even a small collection of books. Education is vital for the territory's future. We need teachers of quality and character. Clara felt a pang of guilt at the word character, thinking of the scandal she had fled, but she pushed the thought aside. Her past was past. Here in Silver City, she had a chance to prove herself on her own merits. When she emerged from the schoolhouse, Marcus was waiting, leaning against a hitching post with the patient stillness she had come to associate with him. How did it go? he asked. I have the position, Clara said, unable to keep the smile from her face. I start teaching in 2 weeks. Congratulations. He offered his arm. I have news as well. Thorne needs someone to handle legal matters for the town. They have been managing without a proper lawyer, but there are land disputes and mining claims that need proper documentation. When I mentioned my background, he offered me a position as town attorney. Clara stopped walking, turning to face him. Marcus, that is wonderful, but are you certain? You said you could not face law practice after the war. I said I could not face going back to Ohio and arguing over property disputes, Marcus corrected. This is different. This is helping build something new, establishing order and justice in a growing community. It feels right in a way that returning to my old life never did. They walked together through the town, and Clara began to see it with new eyes, not just as a refuge but as a home. The people they passed greeted them with friendly nods, and several stopped to welcome Clara to Silver City and express pleasure that she would be their new teacher. As winter gradually released its grip and spring began to make tentative appearances, Clara settled into her new life. She took up residence in a small house provided by the school board, spending her days preparing lessons and getting to know her future students. Marcus found lodging at the hotel initially, but soon rented a small office that came with living quarters above it. They saw each other daily, sometimes for meals, sometimes for walks around the town, often simply for conversation. Marcus proved to be everything Clara had glimpsed in those days at the cabin. Intelligent, kind, thoughtful, with a dry humor that surprised laughs from her when she least expected it. The townspeople began to associate them as a couple, though they had not formalized any arrangement. Clara found she did not mind the assumption. Being seen with Marcus felt right in a way her engagement in St. Louis never had. There was no pretense between them, no need to be anything other than who they truly were. One evening in early April, as the snow finally began to retreat and patches of brown earth appeared like promises of renewal, Marcus invited Clara to supper at a new restaurant that had opened on the main street. She wore her best dress, dark green with cream lace at the collar and cuffs, and took extra care with her hair. Marcus looked equally fine in a proper suit, and when she opened her door to his knock, his expression made her feel beautiful for the first time in longer than she could remember. "You look lovely," he said simply, offering his arm. The restaurant was crowded, but Marcus had reserved a table near the window. They ordered wine, a luxury in Silver City, and Clara felt almost giddy with the romance of it all. This was courting, proper courting, and it felt wonderful. As they ate, Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. His calluses had softened somewhat over the past weeks, but his grip remained strong and sure. "Clara, I need to tell you something. About why I left Ohio, the complete truth of it." She tensed slightly, wondering what confession was coming. "All right. When I returned from the war, I was engaged to a young woman named Margaret. We had been promised to each other since before the fighting started. She waited for me, wrote letters throughout those years." Marcus's jaw tightened. "But when I came home, I was different. The things I had seen done had changed me. I had nightmares, could not bear crowds, could not settle into the quiet life she wanted. She tried, but after 6 months she broke our engagement. She said the man she loved had died in the war, and she could not marry the stranger who came back in his place." "Oh, Marcus," Clara breathed. "She was right," he continued. "I was not the same man. I drifted after that, drinking too much, fighting, making poor choices. When my parents died, I finally realized I was destroying myself. Coming west was not seeking fortune. It was running away before I hurt anyone else or myself beyond repair." "But you did not destroy yourself," Clara said softly. "You survived. You built a life, even if it was a solitary one. I survived, but I was not truly living. Not until that blizzard forced me into the same cabin as a remarkable woman who reminded me that connection, that caring for another person, was worth the risk of pain. Clara felt tears gathering. I need to tell you my truth as well, about why I left St. Louis. Marcus squeezed her hand encouragingly. I was engaged to a banker's son named Thomas Wright. He seemed perfect, everything I thought I wanted. But 3 months before our wedding, I discovered he was having an affair with a married woman, had been for over a year. When I confronted him, he said it meant nothing, that men had needs and I should be understanding. He expected me to marry him anyway to pretend I did not know. But you did not, Marcus said. No, I broke the engagement and he was furious. He spread rumors about me, claimed I had been unchaste, that I had broken our engagement because I was involved with someone else. None of it was true, but in St. Louis society, reputation is everything. I became persona non grata. Former friends would not acknowledge me. I lost my teaching position at the girls' academy. The school's administration said they could not employ someone of questionable moral character, regardless of the truth. So you came here. I fled here, Clara corrected. I was a coward who ran rather than fight to clear my name. Marcus shook his head firmly. You were a survivor who recognized a losing battle and chose to fight on different ground. There is no cowardice in that, Clara, only wisdom. They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped across the table, two wounded people who had found unexpected healing in each other. I love you, Marcus said suddenly. I know it has only been weeks since we met, but I love you. I loved you before we even left that cabin, truth be told. You are brave and smart and kind, and you make me want to be better than I have been. Clara's tears spilled over. I love you too. I was so afraid to admit it, afraid it was too fast, too impulsive. But I cannot deny it any longer. I love you, Marcus Jennings. He stood, drawing her up with him, and kissed her right there in the crowded restaurant. Several diners applauded, and when they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at once, the entire restaurant seemed to be smiling at them. Marry me, Marcus said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Marry me, Clara Vaughn, and let us build a life together in this wild territory. Let us leave our pasts behind and create something new. Yes, Clara said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. More applause erupted, and the restaurant owner sent over a bottle of champagne on the house. They stayed late into the evening, accepting congratulations from strangers who were rapidly becoming friends and neighbors. When Marcus finally walked Clara home, the night air was soft and smelled of spring, of thawing earth and new beginnings. At her door he kissed her again, tender and full of promise. How soon? He asked. I do not want to wait long. The term starts in a week, Clara said. Give me a month to establish myself with the students and their families. Then we can marry. Would that suit you? A month, Marcus agreed. Though it will be the longest month of my life. They were married on a Saturday in early May, with half the town in attendance. The ceremony took place at the church, with Elijah Thorne giving Clara away since she had no family to do so. She wore a dress of pale blue silk that Marcus had ordered from Denver, and she had never felt more beautiful. Marcus wore a new black suit and looked so handsome her breath caught when she saw him waiting at the altar. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed her with such joy and reverence that Clara thought her heart might burst. The town threw them a celebration at the community hall, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Clara danced with her new husband, with Elijah Thorne, with several of her students' fathers, with anyone who asked. She was dizzy with happiness, with the sense that her life had finally found its proper course. Late in the evening, Marcus spirited her away from the party, and they walked hand in hand to the small house he had purchased for them, a neat two-story structure with a garden plot and a view of the mountains. It was not grand, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, and Clara discovered that the connection she and Marcus had forged in that blizzard-bound cabin ran deeper than she had imagined. They fit together, body and soul, two broken pieces made whole by their union. In the months that followed, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Clara taught her students with passion and dedication, quickly becoming beloved by children and parents alike. Marcus established himself as a fair and knowledgeable attorney, helping settle disputes and ensure that justice prevailed in their growing town. Summer arrived in full glory, and they spent Sunday afternoons exploring the countryside, riding out to valleys filled with wildflowers or creeks where they could cool their feet in the rushing water. Marcus taught Clara to fish, and she taught him to appreciate poetry, reading aloud to him in the evenings while he worked on legal documents. As autumn painted the mountains in brilliant reds and golds, Clara realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another month to be certain before telling Marcus, wanting to be sure before raising his hopes. When she finally revealed that she was expecting a child, Marcus's reaction was everything she could have wished. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around their kitchen before setting her down gently as though she might break. "A baby," he breathed, his hand settling reverently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Clara, I never thought I would have this, a family of my own. You have given me everything." "We have given each other everything," Clara corrected, covering his hand with hers. "This baby is the product of our love, and I cannot wait to meet him or her." Winter came again, but this time Clara faced it with joy rather than desperation. She was safe and warm in her home, surrounded by love, growing their child. She continued teaching through December, then reluctantly handed her classes over to a young man fresh from a teacher's college in Chicago, who would serve as substitute until she could return. The baby arrived in early March, during a late winter storm that reminded Clara and Marcus of how they had met. But this time, there was no fear, only anticipation. The town's doctor, a competent woman named Sarah Mills who had trained in Philadelphia, attended the birth along with several experienced mothers who had helped deliver half the babies in Silver City. After hours of labor, Clara heard her baby's first cry, strong and indignant. "A boy," Dr. Mills announced with a smile. "A fine, healthy boy." They named him William Matthew Jennings after both of Marcus's brothers who had fallen in the war. When Marcus held his son for the first time, Clara saw tears streaming down her husband's face. "He is perfect," Marcus whispered. "Absolutely perfect. Thank you, Clara. Thank you for this gift." William, called Will from his earliest days, proved to be a happy, healthy baby who seemed to enjoy being passed around among the townsfolk. Silver City embraced the young family, and Clara often found her porch crowded with neighbors bearing gifts of food or baby clothes. As spring truly arrived, melting the last of the snow, Clara would sit on that porch with Will in her arms, watching Marcus walk home from his office. Her heart would swell with love and gratitude every time she saw him, remembering the stranger who had shared his cabin and his blanket with her during that terrible blizzard. They had come so far from those desperate, uncertain days. They had built a life, a family, a future. When Will was 6 months old, Clara returned to teaching part-time, bringing the baby with her when he was young enough to sleep through lessons. The students adored having a baby in the classroom, and Will seemed to enjoy the attention. The years passed in a blur of joy and occasional challenges. Marcus's law practice thrived, and Clara's reputation as a teacher grew. They added to their family, a daughter named Grace when Will was 3, and another son named Thomas when Grace was 2. Each child was welcomed with the same overwhelming love that had greeted Will. Marcus proved to be a devoted father, spending his evenings playing with the children and his Sundays taking them on expeditions into the foothills. Clara watched her husband with their children and marveled at how the wounded veteran who had fled Ohio had transformed into this confident, loving family man. Silver City grew around them. New businesses opened, more families arrived, and the rough mining camp evolved into a proper town with churches and schools and civilized amenities. Marcus was elected to the town council, and Clara served on the school board. They were respected members of the community, their past sorrows buried under years of present happiness. Sometimes, on winter evenings when snow fell soft and steady outside their warm home, Marcus would pull Clara into his arms and they would remember that cabin, that storm, those 3 extraordinary days that had changed everything. "You ever regret it?" Clara asked during one such evening, the children long asleep upstairs and the house quiet around them. Giving up trapping, settling down, taking on a ready-made family and all its responsibilities. Marcus looked at her as though she had asked if he regretted breathing. "How could I regret the best decision I ever made? You saved me, Clara. That blizzard brought you to my cabin, but you brought me back to life." "We saved each other," Clara said, kissing him softly. "And I would weather 1,000 blizzards if they all led me to you." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Marcus surprised Clara with a trip. He had arranged for Dr. Mills to watch the children for a weekend, and he and Clara rode out into the mountains, to the little cabin where they had first found shelter. It was summer now, and the cabin looked different in the warm sunshine, smaller somehow but still solid. Marcus had arranged with the trapping company to maintain it, and inside they found it clean and stocked with fresh supplies. "I thought we could stay here tonight," Marcus said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Recreate that first night but under happier circumstances." Clara laughed with delight. "That is wonderfully romantic and slightly mad. I love it." They spent the evening as they had a decade before, cooking simple food over the fire and talking. But now their conversation was peppered with stories about their children, updates about the town, plans for the future. They were no longer strangers seeking shelter but partners who knew each other's thoughts almost before they were spoken. As night fell, they lay together on the narrow bed, wrapped in each other's arms rather than merely sharing a blanket for warmth. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Clara asked. "About knowing where the weapons were." "I was trying to make you feel safe," Marcus said. "You did. You made me feel safe and seen and valued, all things I had not felt in a very long time." Clara propped herself up on one elbow to look at him in the firelight. "I knew even then, though I did not want to admit it, that you were special, that what was happening between us was important." "The blizzard brought us together," Marcus said, pulling her back down against his chest. "But we chose to stay together. We built this life through choice and effort and love. And we will keep building it," Clara said, "for as long as we are granted." They returned to Silver City the next day, to their children and their home and their responsibilities, but both felt renewed by their brief return to the place where their story had begun. Years continued to pass, bringing changes both expected and surprising. Will grew into a serious young man interested in medicine, and eventually left Silver City to attend medical school in Chicago. Grace proved to be a gifted artist and teacher, eventually taking over Clara's role at the school. Thomas, the youngest, fell in love with the law like his father and became Marcus's partner in practice. As Clara and Marcus aged, their love deepened rather than diminished. They faced sorrows together: the death of Elijah Thorne, their dear friend, and of Dr. Mills, who had delivered all their children. They celebrated joys, weddings and grandchildren, and the continuing growth of the town they had helped build. On their 25th anniversary, the town held a celebration in their honor, recognizing their contributions to Silver City's development and success. Speeches were made, toasts offered, and Clara found herself overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection from the community. "You two are a love story Silver City tells itself," one of the newer residents said, a journalist who had come west to escape yellow fever in New Orleans. The teacher and the lawyer who found each other during a blizzard and built a family in the wilderness. It is the kind of story that gives people hope. Clara looked at Marcus across the crowded room and saw him smiling at her, his hair now more silver than dark, but his eyes still the same storm cloud gray-blue that had first caught her attention. He made his way through the crowd to her side, taking her hand with the same care he had shown that first night when he helped her down from her horse. "Shall we slip away?" he murmured in her ear. "I believe we have done our duty to society for one evening." They walked home through the spring night, the streets of Silver City familiar as their own heartbeats. Their house, expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family, glowed with lamplight. Grace had the children this evening, so they had the rare luxury of the house to themselves. In their bedroom, Marcus helped Clara with the buttons on her dress, his fingers still nimble despite the arthritis that sometimes troubled his hands. 25 years, Clara said wonderingly. "Has it really been so long?" "The best 25 years of my life," Marcus confirmed. "Though they feel like both forever and no time at all." "Do you think about those 3 days often?" "In the cabin, more than you might imagine," Marcus admitted. "Whenever I face a difficult decision or a hard day, I remember how we survived that storm together. How we learned to trust each other despite being strangers. It reminds me that we can handle whatever comes, as long as we face it together." Clara turned in his arms, resting her head against his chest and listening to his heartbeat, strong and steady. "I almost missed the cabin, you know. I could barely see through the snow. If I had passed it by, I would have died out there and we never would have met." "But you did not miss it," Marcus said, holding her close. "You found shelter and I found you, and everything that followed was inevitable. We were meant to find each other, Clara. I believe that with everything in me." As they settled into bed, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. She had left St. Louis broken and frightened, fleeing a scandal and seeking only escape. She had found so much more: a home, a purpose, a love that had sustained her through decades of joy and sorrow. The blizzard had made them strangers sharing a blanket for warmth and survival. But spring, with its promise of renewal and growth, had made them husband and wife. And the years between had made them partners, parents, pillars of their community, and most importantly, each other's truest love. More years passed, bringing the new century with its promises and challenges. Silver City continued to grow, with electric lights arriving in 1899 and an automobile appearing on the streets in 1903. To the amazement of everyone who remembered when the town had been little more than a mining camp. Clara retired from teaching at 60, handing the school over to Grace with confidence that her daughter would carry on the tradition of excellence. Marcus continued practicing law until he was 65, finally retiring when his arthritis made writing difficult. Thomas took over the practice entirely, carrying on the Jennings name with pride. They were blessed with 8 grandchildren, ranging in temperament from studious to wild, and they delighted in spoiling each one. Their house remained a gathering place for family, especially on Sundays, when children and grandchildren would descend for dinner and conversation. that lasted late into the evening. On a summer afternoon in 1910, Clara and Marcus sat on their porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard while their own children supervised. Will had returned from Chicago for the summer with his family, and the house was wonderfully chaotic with multiple generations under one roof. "We did well," Marcus observed, reaching over to take Clara's hand. "Look at all of this. We built this, you and I." "We had help," Clara said, but she was smiling. "From each other, from this town, from sheer, stubborn determination not to let our pasts define our futures. I love you more today than I did 25 years ago, and I loved you more then than I did in that cabin," Marcus said. "Every day with you has been a gift, Clara, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones because we faced them together." Clara squeezed his hand, her own eyes misty. "I never imagined this life when I was fleeing St. Louis. I never let myself dream of happiness like this. You gave me permission to hope again, Marcus. You showed me that love does not have to hurt, that a partner can be truly that, a partner, not a master or a judge." As evening approached and the family gathered for dinner, Clara looked around the crowded table and felt overwhelming gratitude. Her children were healthy and happy, her grandchildren bright and full of potential. Her husband, her love, her partner in everything, sat at the head of the table, gray-haired and lined but still handsome to her eyes, still the man who had shared his cabin and changed her life. After dinner, when the children were playing games and the adults were relaxing with coffee and conversation, Grace approached her parents with a wrapped package. "I made something for you," she said, her artist's hands nervous. "For your 30th anniversary next year, but I wanted you to have it now." Clara unwrapped the package carefully to reveal a painting. It showed a small cabin in a snowstorm, barely visible through the swirling white, with warm light glowing from the single window. In the foreground, barely discernible, were the figures of a man and a woman, strangers yet, about to find shelter and so much more. "Grace," Clara breathed, "it is beautiful." "You told us the story so many times when we were children," Grace said. "About the blizzard and the cabin and how you and Papa found each other. I wanted to capture that moment, when your whole lives were about to change and you did not even know it yet." Marcus studied the painting with suspicion bright in his eyes. "You captured it perfectly, daughter. The fear and the hope, all mixed together. This belongs over the mantel, so we can remember every day how blessed we have been." The painting went up that very evening, and it became a treasured part of the household. Visitors would ask about it, and Clara and Marcus would tell the story again, each telling slightly different but the heart always the same. Two broken people finding each other in a storm and choosing to build a life together. As they aged into their 70s, their pace slowed but their devotion never wavered. Marcus's health began to decline gradually, his heart growing weaker despite the doctor's best efforts. He remained cheerful and engaged, refusing to be defeated by his failing body. On a winter evening, with snow falling soft outside their window, Marcus lay in their bed with Clara beside him. The whole family had gathered, sensing that time was growing short. "I need you to know," Marcus said to Clara, his voice weak but steady, "that every single day with you was worth living for. You saved me in that cabin, but you kept saving me every day after. You made me want to be better, to do better, to build something lasting." "You saved me too," Clara said through her tears. "We saved each other, my love, and we built a beautiful life together. Promise me you will keep living," Marcus said. "Keep teaching our grandchildren, keep telling our story, do not hide away in grief. That is not who we are." "I promise," Clara whispered, "but I will miss you every moment." "I will be waiting," Marcus said with absolute certainty. "And when you come to me, whether it is tomorrow or 20 years from now, I will be there to welcome you home." He died that night peacefully, surrounded by his family, his hand clasped in Clara's. She felt the moment he left, felt the absence of his spirit even though his body remained, and the pain was like being torn in half. But she kept her promise. She grieved, yes, deeply and honestly, but she did not hide away. She continued to participate in family life, to offer wisdom to her children and grandchildren, to tell the story of the blizzard and the cabin and the love that had sustained them for 46 years. She lived 7 more years, years filled with great-grandchildren and continued adventures, though none compared to the greatest adventure of her life, loving Marcus Jennings. On a spring morning at the age of 81, Clara passed away in her sleep. Her family found her with a smile on her face, and they took comfort in believing that Marcus had kept his promise, that he had been waiting to welcome her home. They buried her beside Marcus in the Silver City Cemetery, on a hillside overlooking the town they had helped build. The entire community turned out for the funeral, multiple generations who had been touched by the Jennings family's legacy. At Clara's request, we'll read from a letter she had written years before, to be opened after her death. To my beloved children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, I have lived a long and blessed life, far beyond what I dreamed possible in my youth. Your grandfather and I found each other through Providence and a blizzard, but we built our life together through choice, commitment, and love that grew deeper with each passing year. I want you to remember that love is not always easy or simple. It requires work and forgiveness and choosing each other again and again, especially when it would be easier to walk away. But true love, the kind your grandfather and I shared, is worth every challenge, every compromise, every difficult conversation. Build your lives with intention. Choose partners who see you, who value you, who challenge you to be better than you thought possible. Create families bound not just by blood but by genuine affection and respect. And never forget that even the darkest storms can lead to the brightest blessings. The blizzard made us strangers sharing a blanket. Spring made us husband and wife. But the years between, all those precious, ordinary, extraordinary years, made us truly one. I go now to rejoin my love, and I go with a heart full of gratitude for every moment granted to us. Live well, love deeply, and tell our story so that others might find hope in it. That is my final wish and my blessing to you all. The letter was passed down through the generations, along with Grace's painting of the cabin in the snow. And the story of Clara and Marcus Jennings became part of Silver City's folklore. Young couples would hike out to the old cabin, now maintained as a historical site, and make wishes for love as lasting as the teacher and the lawyer who had found each other there. And every winter, when the first big snowstorm rolled down from the mountains, the older residents of Silver City would remember and tell the young ones about the blizzard that had brought 2 wounded souls together, and the spring that had made them one, creating a legacy of love that lasted far beyond their years. Their descendants prospered and spread across the West, but all carried the story with them, a reminder that sometimes the worst storms bring the greatest blessings, and that true love, once found, can weather anything life brings. The Jennings family grew into a sprawling tree with branches reaching into every profession and corner of the country. But they all traced their roots back to that small cabin in Montana Territory and the 3 days that changed everything. In Silver City, the schoolhouse where Clara taught still stood, renovated and modernized but bearing a plaque honoring its most beloved teacher. Marcus's old law office became a museum dedicated to the early days of the town's legal system. And their home, preserved by the family, occasionally opened for tours, allowing visitors to see where this remarkable couple had lived and loved and built their legacy. But the true monument to their love was not in buildings or plaques. It was in the values they had passed down, the importance of choosing each other, of facing challenges together, of building something lasting through dedication and commitment. It was in the way their descendants loved their own partners, the way they prioritized family, the way they contributed to their communities. The blizzard had made them strangers, yes, but it had also made them possible. And spring, with all its promise and renewal, had made them husband and wife, beginning a journey that touched hundreds of lives across generations. And somewhere, in whatever place souls rest when their earthly journeys end, Marcus and Clara Jennings remained together still, their love story complete and yet eternal, a testament to the power of choosing love even in the darkest storms, and the beautiful truth that sometimes the greatest blessings come wrapped in the most unexpected packages.